With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Tes Zayin. We left off on Daf Tes Vav, Amid Base, 4 lines from the top of the Amid. We're going to continue, beginning with referring back to the Mishnah that speaks about one who used schach that's invalid. Pasal schach, one example the Mishnah gave is that the person is using aruchos hamita, which are the sides of a bed. And we're going to have to explain why indeed will boards, when they are not an entirety of a keli, they're not a bed, they're only parts of the bed or they're sides of the bed, why is it considered a keli, or why is it considered invalid for schach? And we're going to quote the Shita of Rav Ami Bar Tavyume, who holds that worn out pieces of clothing, we're speaking about clothing that are made from Gidulei Karka, we're speaking about clothing that other than being kalim would have been kosher to schach. Obviously, one of the 3 rules is it cannot be something that's mekabel tuma. So says Rav Ami that if you have such a small piece that came from the garment, even though currently it's not a keli, since it comes from a keli, it was part of a keli, it continuously remains pasal schach. We're going to apply and speak again about mats that we use nowadays for schach. We're going to go back to the rule in the Mishnah that teaches us that hachoytet begodish, that if a person hollows out a haystack, the Mishnah says that was the introduction of the rule, and by Tanoim of Tasav Elohim Ha'asui, the Sukah is invalid. And we're going to see an exception to that rule, that you can have a haystack and you can hollow it out and it will be valid as long as you have the 10 tfachim height and the minimum 7 by 7. And then the Mishnah Daf Tezayin is going to speak more about the rule that we already mentioned a few times, both of good achis and of good asik. Good meaning, do we say that the wall asik goes up, which is what we paskin like, as long as you have a halachic wall, which means it's 10 tfachim tall, even though it doesn't go all the way up to the schach. Halachically, we consider it as if it goes mamish all the way up to the schach. And then in the reverse, what happens if you have a halachic wall, because it's 10 tfachim of height, but it was placed adjacent to the schach, and it only goes down 10 tfachim. It doesn't go all the way down to the ground. It doesn't go down within 3 tfachim from the ground. And we're going to learn the Tanach that holds that we do say good achis. That's going to be connected to a topic that we learned by Shabbos and in Masechtas Eruvin, known as a mechitza tuluya, a suspended partition. And we're going to say, and we're going to compare Hilchas Sukah to Hilchas Shabbos, or we will explain why one should not be compared to the other. And finally, we're going to have on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis the rule that a machatzeles arba'o umashahu, that if you have a mat or a wall that's not 10 tfachim, it's only 4 tfachim and a bit, that it could become a halachically valid wall for a sukkah that has 10 tfachim of height, even though the wall really b'metzias only has 4 tfachim and a bit. And in other words, as we'll see, that we apply the rule of lavud twice on the same wall, we are allowed to do so. And chevra, many other details regarding sukkah. Let us begin again on Daf Tezvav, Amid Beis, 4 lines from the top of the Amid, in this little, relatively in quantity, short Amid, when the Mishnah is referring back, Oy ba'aruchai samita, someone who covered part of one sukkah with the sides of a bed, and the rule that we learned in the Mishnah, as we just finished learning yesterday, that as long as you add roiv schach, right, or exactly 50-50 according to Rav Papa, or you have to have the majority of schach, that's kosher, then we apply the concept, according to Rashi, of bitul. The schach pesula becomes bottled in the schach that's kosher. We view it all as kosher schach, and you have a valid sukkah. But now we want to understand, why is it a problem b'chlal to use the sides of beds? The bed frames and the bed legs were made out of wood. They don't have a receptacle. Of course, when they are all together and they are serving as a keli, you can argue that it's a keli. But l'chayda, if it's only part of it, why should there be a problem to begin with? Why do you have to rectify it by putting down 50% or 51% of Pesol, it itself should be okay. So L'chura says the Gemara that Lema Misayeh Leila Rav Ami. Seemingly from here we can bring a proof to that which the Amoira Rav Ami Bar Tavyume says to Amar Rav Ami Bar Tavyume that Sukah bivuloi kelim, and if a person uses worn out kelim, here means garments, and we're speaking either about a garment made out of cotton or a garment that's made out of linen. And yes, we quoted in the past the sheet of the Rambam that holds that if there is something that's completely nishtanu tsurasan, so we're speaking here about linen, that once you make from the flax, from the pishtan that grows from the ground, you transform it into fibers, that Rambam holds midrabanan, it's not a valid schach, even though it came from the ground, it's no longer connected to the ground. Even before you render it into a proper bona fide kleli, because since it looks so unlike its source, rabbinically it's not good, but that's only a rabbinic prohibition. On the biblical level, it's before you make it into a garment, it's going to be kosher. And actually, some understand that if we're speaking about a cotton garment, there are certain ways that they would make cotton garments then that it wasn't completely nishtanu tsurasim. So we're speaking about a beged. If not for it being a beged, it would have been kosher eschach, but it became a beged. And now the beged got worn out, and you have a little part of it. So says Rab Ami Bar Tavyumi, even if it is not considered anymore a halachic beged, now we learn about this din every now and then, and that is that if you have, let's speak about pishtan specifically, wool or linen, I know wool is not good for schach b'chlal, but the rule of bigadim is that wool of linen, if you have a piece of a garment, or call that a patch, even if it's only 3 by 3 finger breadths, it's considered a keli, because at least aniyim would use it as a patch. But if it doesn't even have the 3 by 3 finger breadth size, then it's b'chlal not a keli. So Rav Ami is saying that even if it's beloi, even if it's worn out, meaning it's not even 3 by 3, right now it's not a keli. Nevertheless, it remains invalid for it to be used as schach. And why is that? Because since it was previously a beged, and once it became invalidated because it's a beged, it doesn't lose that psul, even though right now it's worn out. And that's the contact, that's the correlation that we're making with the Mishnah. Since when the bed was complete, was wholesome, it was considered a keli, and it's not valid for schach. That's why the Mishnah is saying that even though it's only a side of a bed, which means the bed was taken apart, it remains invalid schach. Says the Gemara that that's not necessarily true. And why is that? Because I might counter argue, Amar Rav Chanan Amar Ami, he said it elsewhere, we'll see the elsewhere in a moment, that you know what Aruchais Amita is referring to. Not that the bed was so taken apart that it's taka not considered the keli right now. No. But Arucha Ushtei Kira'ayim, you have the boards on the sides that go to the length and the boards that go to the width. The length are longer. So either you have one side board that is connected still to 2 of its legs, or B'Kitzara, you have the wide board that's still connected to 2 of its legs. And we'll see where he said that. But when you have such a part of a bed, it is still considered a keli. Maybe our Tana will hold that if it's taka currently not a keli, even though it came from a keli, it goes back to being kosher schach. Our Mishnah is speaking about a scenario where the bed is still considered a keli. So perhaps the second to last line, hachinami barucho shtei kura'ayim or b'ketzaru shtei kura'ayim. That's why the sides of the bed are considered pasal schach, because it's currently a keli, and therefore you have to go back to the solution of adding psal, which will either let Rav Papa be 50% of the schach area, or a bit more roiv schach kesheda, and only then will the sukkah be rendered kosher. Now, heichi itmed Rab Chanan Amar Rebbe, for what, regarding what Mishnah did he say that the concept of a side of a bed is still referring to a bed that's considered a keli currently? Ahadetnan, regarding the Mishnah that we learned in Masechtas Kelim, turning to Daf Tezayin Amud Aleph, the Mishnah says that mitom mitames chavila, that a bed frame can only become tamei when it's a chavila, says Rashi, when it's one unit. When it's one unit. In other words, if the bed is not considered a keli, prior to it being a put together bed, it cannot become tamei. because that's a general rule when it comes to tuma, that something is only susceptible to becoming tummy if it is right now a completed product. Now, the chiddush of the Tanach, which is Rabbi Eliezer, is more than that. What happens if the bed became tummy, and then you took the bed apart? Now, just to make it clear, if you take the bed apart, if it's currently not a keli, it loses its tuma. The question will be, the way Tosfos points out, what will happen if you reconnect it? And the answer for that will be, the tuma will return. You never took it to the mikvah. So one might think, okay, so I should be allowed to take it to the mikvah when it's taken apart. So Rabbi Eliezer holds that umitaheres, you can only really purify it when it's one unit. And if you take the pieces of the bed to the mikvah, and then you rebuild the bed, the tumah will return. It also went to the mikvah. It didn't go to the mikvah as a keli. So holds Rabbi Eliezer. However, the Chachamim disagree. First of all, they hold that mitame sevadim, that even prior to it being a unit, it could acquire tumah. Now that's a problem, because prior to it being a keli, everyone agrees that if something is currently not a keli, it cannot acquire tumah. So that for this, we're going to have to explain a vadim means that it's not completely put together, but enough of it is put together, arucho shtei k'ra'ayim, ktsaro shtei k'ra'ayim, that it could be used. And now, number two, that the Chachamim hold, umitaheres sevadim, that if a bed became tamei, because it was considered a keli, it was considered a bed, and then you took it apart, and you have different boards of the bed, and you take it to the mikvah, while it is only a varim, and then you rebuild it, it will not become tamei. End of Mishnah. And now the question will be, how can the Chachamim hold umitames a varim? If something is not a keli, it cannot become tamei. So for that, Amar Rab Chanan, Amar Rebbe, that the Mishnah in Kalim is referring to erucho shtei k'ra'ayim or ktsaro shtei k'ra'ayim, and therefore, since it is usable, it's considered keli enough to become tamei. Now, by the way, clear, if it became tamei and you even took that apart, it's not a sideboard and two legs. It's just one part of it. It's just a sideboard. There is where the Chachamim hold that you take it to the mikvah. Now, currently, it's fine. But if you take the Eivarim to the mikvah, and then v'chazar v'chibra, the tumah will not return. Okay. Now the question is, what function can anyone have from only one sideboard, whether it's the longer one or the length or the width one, and two legs? So the Gemara says, L'may chazya, either l'mismechinu aguda, that if you bring it up and lean it on a wall, if you support somehow this part of the bed into the wall, on the wall, then ulemesav alayu, then you will be able to sit on it, or umishda ashley, or you will even be able to weave ropes around that part. As long as you can lean it in the wall or on the wall, it can not only function as a seat, but you will be able to lay down over there a small item or a small person. And for that, if you have a picture, you'll see b'diuk, it works. Okay, Gufa, we learned above.
I sent it to you.
Even though we said that our Mishnah doesn't for sure prove the shita of Rav Ami Bar Tavyumi, but so is the shita, which is a big chiddush. So when it comes to schach, even if something currently is not a keli, if it was a keli, part of a keli is not going to be valid for schach. Gufa, we learned above. Amar Rav Ami Bar Tavyumi. Guys, we're 6 lines on top of the Amid. Let's move weiter. Okay, let's move weiter. That what? That's chacha b'veloi kalim. If a person used worn out garment, a worn out garment means you have such a small part of the big day of Pishtan, let's say. And if you want to insist that Rambam, it's not good anyway. So we'll speak about cotton. It doesn't have the minimum shear. Currently, it's not a keli, but since it came from a keli, it remains puzzle for schach. My beloi kalim. What are we talking about? Amar Abaye Matloniyos, we're speaking about a patch, a piece of a keli was worn out, but some of it remained, that it doesn't even have 3 by 3 finger breadths. That's important, because if it were to have 3 by 3, by tzemer upishtin, not tfachim, finger breadths, since at least aniyim would use it as a patch, it remains a keli. But if it's not even that, it's taka not a keli. It cannot be mekabel tuma right now. It will not be mekabel tuma right now. But as far as hilchas schach is concerned, so he holds. It came from a keli. It remains invalid for schach. And even though our Mishnah cannot be used as a raya, but Tanya Kavasi de Rav Ami Bar Tavyume, we're going to find a Braisa, which clearly will be a source for this shita. What does it say in the Braisa? Machatzeles, a mat that's made out of shifa or gemi. These are different types of plants. Setch plant, rushes plant. You can all Google and see what they are. In other words, clear, it's something that grows off the ground. You disconnected it from the ground, but you made it into a mat. Now, a mat is a problem. A mat is a keli. And also when it comes to the minimum size of a mat. So just like we learned that by a beged fiber, so there's different shiurim. If it comes from tzemer or pishtim, it's 3x3. There's a whole Mishnah in Kalim that will quote them. A mat needs to be 6x6. If I'm not 6x6 tfachim, then it's considered a functional mat. So it says the Braisa that if you already had a mat, it became invalid because it became a keli, even though now, now it got used out and the sides got rubbed out and it's no longer the 6x6 tfachim. Right now, it's not a keli. Nevertheless, it was a mat. Clear, the Braisa says, ein misachachin bohen, because since they originated from an object that was subjected to tumah, that psul remains even on its remnant. Furthermore, says the Braisa, machatzeles hakonim, if you have a reed mat, now this is directly connected to the mats that we use. Now, guys, appreciate again that the material from what you make these mats are good for schach. The only problem is that it's a keli. But let's clarify something else. What do we mean by a keli? Now, there are different standards of keli. If it was never made for anything to be put upon it, it is wood. It is pshute kleis, it's flat. So if it was made for a hammock, if it was made for a mat, if it was made for a seat, that's a bona fide keli. That's pasal eschach. Something that was made only to give shade, even though it's tied together, it's made together, it's not considered a keli for it to be invalid for schach. And by the way, it's not only if it was made for shade. If it was made to be a mechitza partition to provide privacy, that's also not a problem for schach because it was not made to hold anything. What we're looking for is for it to be a keli in the context that it was made for something to go on top of it. It's going to be a recipient to something that's going to go above it. So if, says the Braisa, if it's very large and people would only make large mats from reeds for schach, that's what they would make it for. So even though it's properly put together, it's a functional shade cover, doesn't invalidate it. And misachachin ba, only when it's small, however you define then the size small, since those small reeds, mats, were talking made for a mat. You put a mat out, people to step on it. It was made for someone or something to go on top of it. That is what renders even pshute kleyates into a halachi keli that becomes invalid for schach. Ein misachachin ba'om. However, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, that I disagree with you. Even the large mat that is generally made for shade is also not valid schach. Af hi mikabelas tuma. Why is that? Because Rabbi Eliezer holds that people would use even large mats to lay upon, and therefore ve'ein misachachin bo. And at least now this is a clarity. When people say they began to make these kosher for sukkah mats, what is the nekuda here? That it's manufactured by Yidden that made it for schach, which is good. So you know that it was not made not for a mat, not for a hammock, or not for any other function that others might use to lay upon or to put something on it or to sit upon it. And on the other hand, there are factories in China that we know what they're making them for, or they're so flimsy that you can argue this was not made for anyone to lay on it. It was only made to be as a mechitza partition to provide privacy, has a kri'iyah between shchenim. Sometimes the material itself shows what it was made for. That will also be valid. But if you have a suffix, what it was made for, then you got yourself a real problem. even though it's pshute clay aids, but it's a finished product, and it was made to receive something that renders those mats into a proper keli, and they may not be used for schach. And just to finalize, to go back, that what we said was correct. We learned just a few daf ago, beginning I think on daf Yudalid, this whole Gezeira Stikra, not Gezeira Stikra. Going prior back, bundles, the Gezeira of a bundle, Chaveli Kash, the daf Yud Beis. So that's the pshat. The Gezeira Midrabana not to use a bundle is taka the way Rabbi Yechanan learned pshat, is because you cannot put on your sukkah an item that is stored the way it's on top of your roof. And absolutely, go to Home Depot right now, or go to the kosher stores that sell items for sukkahs. They don't store it the way we put it on our schach. They dafka don't do it that way. It's rolled up. So it's not shayach to that issue of chavilam. It's not, even though that it's tied, the little pieces are tied one to the other, that's not called a bundle. Bundle means you may not place something on your schach in a way that it's stored. And we don't place the mats the way that it's stored. Okay, let's go right. Hachoited begadish. Sounds like a very clear cut in the Mishnah, that if a person has a haystack, in other words, there's a group, a body of gedulei min haaretz that's not mechuber and not mekabel tuma. Nevertheless, if you went out and you made a hollow, you hollowed out this pile, let's just call this a haystack, even though now you created the 10 height minimum and the 7 by 7 minimum, it's not going to be kosher. Why? Because when you placed that pile, when you made the haystack, it wasn't placed for it to provide shade for anything, because there's nothing underneath it. And it was not placed for schach. If it was not placed for schach, so now that you hollowed it out, even though now the top part of the haystack is providing shade for people that go inside of it, but that's tasav v'lo min ha'asui. And tasav v'lo min ha'asui is a biblical issue. And let's read the Gemara that there is an exception. So Amar Afuna lo yishanu ela she'ein sham halal tefach b'meshach shiva. He says a gavaldik chiddush. That's only if the haystack was made in a way that in it, or right underneath it, you don't even have one tefach of height, of vacuum, of airspace, one tefach of height in an area of 7 by 7 tefachim. Now, obviously, chevra, 7 by 7 tefachim is only a minimum size sukkah if it has 10 tefachim of airspace height. True. But let's not forget the din that we just learned recently, that if you have a corpse tumah and you have a oil on top of it, as long as there is a roim tefach of airspace, then the roof doesn't allow the tumah to go beyond it. It will not be called tumah retzutza. So says Gavaldik, says Rafuna, that if you don't have even that one tefach by 7 by 7, then it's correct to say that the top part of the haystack was not placed and did not function as a shade, as a cover, and therefore hollowing it out creates the problem of tasav v'lo min ha'asui. Aval yeshem halal tefach. If from the outset when you made that haystack there was always in it or right directly underneath it, there was an area that wasn't kosher for sukkah. It only had the height of a tefach of empty airspace, but it had an empty airspace. And it occupied 7 by 7 length and width. Since you can argue that from the outset, the haystack served as a schach, not for a kosher sukkah, but it served as a cover for the area underneath it. So taka, you have to rectify it to give it the minimum shiurim for a sukkah. You're going to have to hollow out to make it 10 tefachim height. But if you do so, then the sukkah is kosher. Hanei is a sukkah, gevaldik, chiddush. And Tanya Nami Hachi, now we heard it first from Rafuna, and then we found the Braisa that says so clearly that a choited begadish, that if you hollow out a haystack and you make it, you give it the dimensions of a sukkah, it says in a Braisa, opposite of what it says in the Mishnah. Yes, Hanei is a sukkah. Did we not learn in our Mishnah befedish ein a sukkah? How do you resolve the contradiction? Elalav shwami no. That the Braisa is speaking about a scenario that the haystack from the outset had underneath it a very short, hollowed out space, short, not good for a sukkah. You're going to have to hollow it out to complement the 10 tefachim height. But as long as it had at least 1 tefach height by 7 by 7, then you can say the whole haystack was a sukkah, was offering shade and shelter from the outside. Shmami Noam. Other people introduced Rafuna, that Rafuna knew about the Braisa, and he said a statement to Faren for the Stira. Some people learned it as a contradiction. In our Mishnah it says, because when you place the haystack, it was not offering shade or shelter for nothing. We learned in a Braisa that it is a sukkah. So after they brought the Braisa on that, the Braisa must be speaking about a scenario that from when you made the haystack, from the beginning, it was already covering an area. What's that an area? It had 1 tefach of airspace underneath it. How is that called an area? For dinei tumah tzutza, it's called an area. And all you need to do now is to make it from 1 tefach. You have to add 9 tefachim. You got yourself a real sukkah. Our Mishnah is speaking about a haystack that never had a halal tefach b'meshach shiva underneath it. It was never placed for schach. It's not kosher. Now it's kosher. Now you made a hollow. Tasav aleimin hasoim. And now let's start learning Mishnayos regarding the rules of the walls of a sukkah. Says the Mishnah, Hamashal shall defanis mil mailo lamatam. If one will construct walls in a sukkah, but he's going from the schach area, from the roof down, the definition of a wall is at least 10 tfachim. He has the 10 tfachim. But the sukkah, the schach, is much more than 10 tfachim above the ground. So he's rolling it down, like you have the picture here in the right, and it doesn't come all the way to the ground. What's that all the way to the ground? So guys, lavud is a phenomenal other rule. If the wall will come within 3 tefachim from the ground, halachically it's touching the ground. There's no issue. But if im gavoya min ha'aretz shloisha tefachim, our Tanakama will not apply, will not use good achis, will not use the rule that now halacha l'moshe misinai, it's as if it touches the ground. And the reason for that is, as we spoke out in Eruvin a lot, not in water, on ground, that since this is the Lashon Chazal, that Gedoyim, Boikim by, since goats can go underneath the wall, so it breaks this halacha l'moshe misinai, good achis wall, and you don't have a wall on that side. Now guys, don't forget in all of these Mishnayos, and if a person built a 4-walled sukkah, and only one was gavoyim in ha'aretz shloisha tfachim, the sukkah won't be possible because you don't need that wall. We're speaking about a sukkah that has 3 walls. One side is completely open, and the entire wall, you're not even remaining with the theoretical 1 tefach or with the rabbinic 7 tefachim. No, is above 3 tefachim. The Tanakama holds psula. But if you built a wall milmata l'mayla, it's touching the ground, or it's within 3 tefachim from the ground. It's 10 tefachim tall. It doesn't go up to the schach. As long as im gavoya asara tefachim, then yes, ksheda. Why ksheda? Because of good asik mechitzta. Now, what you do need for the schach to go, let's say now, right above the good asik wall. But it's as if the wall goes all the way to the edge of the schach. Rabbi Yossi is more lenient. And he says, we have this concept that we are calling good asik. And the key is you have to have a doifin. Yeah, a doifin means 10 tfachim. You have to have a sort of tfachim, but once you have the doifin, it goes all the way up. Rabbi Yossi does subscribe. He holds of this good achis mechitzta, goes down, and therefore you're going to have yourself a kosher wall. And if you are relying on that wall, gesundheit, and the sukkah will be kosher. Now we want to understand what's the machlekes. But Ma'akom Miflegi, what's the underlying machlekes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi? Says the Gemara, Mar Sava, Rabbi Yossi holds that mechitza tuluya materes. Guys, mechitza tuluya means a suspended partition. This is a term that we used in Hilchas Shabbos when we're speaking about sectioning off an area to render it into a reshus hayachid. And just like we learned over there regarding you have a mechitza, but it's suspended, it doesn't go all the way down. If for Hilchas Shabbos it's considered a partition, then for Hilchas Sukah it's also considered a partition. MERCAVA, the Tanach holds that by Shabbos, mechitza teluya is not matir, and therefore neither is it matir by a Sukah. In other words, the first approach is that we are linking whatever is called a mechitza for Shabbos in this. And we already learned in the beginning of the Masechta, even this Gemara doesn't hold that they are completely alike. But as far as this rule is concerned, and the words that are used in Shabbos is mechitza teluya, suspended partition, it's either good or not good. And if it's good by Shabbos, it's good for Sukkah. Says the Gemara Tanan Hassan. We learned over there. Now this is a Mishnah in Eruvin, but it's connected to this mechitza teluya. And let me explain what we're speaking about. We're speaking about two chatzeros, one adjacent to the other, side by side. We already introduced the concept of the need midrabanan for the people that live in the homes going into the chatzer to make a ruvei chatzeros with each other. Now, if you have two chatzeros side by side and there is a window or a door that allows access one chatzer to the other, they are able to make one large eruv. If you have two adjacent chatzeros that don't have a way of going from one to the other through a proper door or window, they don't have an option. They are not allowed to. They cannot join together in an eruv. And that's what happened. You have two separate chatzeros. Each chatzer made their own eruv chatzeros, but the halachically they cannot join. There was no door opening between them. Now here's the challenge. Right in between these two chatzeros, there is a water pit. The water, some of the pit is in Chatzer A, some of the water is in Chatzer B. And like we mentioned, these two Chatzeros are sectioned off one from the other. If there is an opening, they can all join in an eruv, but there is a wall. And the wall goes right over the water pit. Question is, can members of either Chatzer draw water? Why would they not be allowed to draw water? Based on the concept known as arivei mayom. The waters move back and forth. The waters on the right side and the waters of the left side don't remain static. So since these two chatzeros were unable to be ma'arav with each other, therefore midrabanan, people from Chatzer Aleph cannot take things from Chatzer Beis to bring it into their yard, so they won't be able to take the water. They won't be able to take the water. Now hold on. If we're going to subscribe to good achis mechitza, then we can argue that, hey, the wall, the halachic wall that goes above the water pit, ke'ilu goes all the way down to the bottom of the water pit. And that should therefore halachically separate the pit into two pits. Each one is only drawing water from their pit. Do we say that or not? And over there we learned the first opinions don't allow for you to use good achis. However, they find a creative solution by adding an additional wall inside the water pit. Let's read it inside. If you have a boil, you have a cistern, you have a water pit that is exactly located in between two chatzeros, and as we explained, these are chatzeros that were halachically unable to join together in an eruv. Thus, no one is allowed to take items from the other neighboring chatzer, and therefore, a memalan mimenu b'Shabbos, to begin with, you can't take water before you find a solution because of the concept of arivei maya. We viewed the water in the pit prior to a solution to be also from the adjacent chatzer. It might have been there before and it moved to your side of the pit. But what will be the solution? You have to make another partition. It doesn't have to seal off the pit into two, but you have to add a new mechitza that you put inside the pit. Elam Kain. The partition has to have 10 tfachim height. If not, it's not called a partition. We will follow the girsa of Rashi that will skip the next two words, bein milmailo. Skip that, even though it's going to be included in a line from now. Now, where do you have to position it? Wherever you want. Either milmata means that if the height of the water in the pit is low, either you're going to put this partition all the way down for it to touch the water, or Or the last line in the Amid, which Rashi says is the milmaila, it can be higher up in the pit. The partition down there in the pit whoever is looking at the screen, it's the top picture, doesn't even have to touch the water. But even though it's milmaila, that's the last line, but it has to be betoich oigno, it has to be within the lip of the pit. As long as this mechitza is within the pit, that is sufficient. And dafka, because we're lenient, we don't say good achis. But on the other hand, you need to have water. People need water. So the chachamim were, and don't forget that midoi raisa, b'chlal, everything is good. Everything is one big reshus hayachid. All of this is only for the Eruv Chatzeres Midrabanan, so you don't say good achis, but to be lenient when it comes to water needs, add a mechitz. So holds the Tanach. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Oimer, turning to Daf Tezayin Amud Beis. He says that actually he agrees also that you can't use the wall that goes on top of the pit. We don't say good achis, but he holds that the details of where do you have to place this new wall within the pit is subject to a machloikes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. That Beis Shammai Yoimrim, that you may position it milmaila, you may position it milya. Of course, milmata. Milmata means touching the water. Again, milmaila also means within the lip. Beis Hillel holds that it has to be placed milmata. By the way, here, if that's the right version, then Beis Hillel is the machmer. Tosfos, the top little Tosfos, points out that there are other times that this is quoted throughout Shas, and we have an opposite record of what Beis Shammai said and what Beis Hillel said. And there are other places where Beis Hillel was the one that allowed it even milmaila, and Beis Shammai holds only milmata. But whether it's the Tanakama or whether it's Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, whether it's our Girsa of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel or not, it's all predicated on one premise, that the wall that is separating the chatzeros that's running above the oigen, above the pit, cannot be used because we don't say good achis. However, Amar Rebbe Yehuda, that loy tehei mechitza, that this new partition that you are claiming you have to add, why is that gedola? Why does it have a greater power than the mechitza that's already there? The mechitza that's already there is the mechitza that's min ha-koisel shebeneim, the mechitza that's separating the two chatzeros. Because guys, no one says that you have to seal the pit into two pits. So even this new partition that you're putting inside the boyd, whether it is milmaila, whether it is milmata, it's just a mechitza. You still have to use the good achis. So if you're anyways using good achis, don't do anything. The wall that's going on the top is echet avant that has 10 tfachim height, and that can be good achis. Obviously, the Tanakama and Rabba and Shimon Gamliel, they would hold that no, that you don't say good achis. Like we just mentioned, if you don't say good achis, how does this new partition help? So we just quoted the Rashi and Amud Aleph, because people need water, and midai daisa you're allowed to carry. So they felt that adding another mechitza is enough for this case. So clearly by Shabbos, you see there's a machlokes kanoim, whether we subscribe to good achas mechitza or not. And therefore it comes out that the Rabbi Yehuda over there in Eruvin, which is for Hilchas Shabbos, and Rabbi Yosi here by Sukah, that if you're Mershalshel milmaila lamata, you're good. L'chu'ura, they say the same thing, and indeed, Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah in Eruvin, B'shitas Rabbi Yosi Amara, is following the same sheet of Rabbi Yosi in Masechta Sukah. They both hold Mechitza Teluya Materes, based on the rule Halacha L'Moshe Sinai that good achis mechitza. Says our Gemara that I hear what you're saying, you Rabba Bar Chana Rabbi Yechanan. But it lav dafke. I disagree with that. V'loi Rabbi Yehuda saval like Rabbi Yosi, v'loi Rabbi Yosi saval like Rabbi Yehuda. You can argue very well that they are two separate arguments. Yet they're both using the good achis, but you can't say that one will hold of the other. And the Gemara explains beautifully. Loi Rabbi Yehuda saval like Rabbi Yosi, because I can argue that Akan loi ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda Hassan. Don't forget that the Mishnah that we just learned is only for a rabbinic need. Midai Raisa, both of the Chatzeros are a Reshus HaYachid. Midoiraisa, you are allowed to carry from one Rishus HaYachid to a neighboring Rishus HaYachid, even though they belong to different people. The whole need of Eruv Chatzeres is only midrabanan. Okay, so to address a only rabbinic rule, for that we say good achis mechitzta. Aval hachi by sukkah, since the need of sitting in a sukkah and the need of having the minimum 3 walls is the oiraisa, maybe Rabbi Yehuda will not be moided to Rabbi Yossi, and the same in the reverse. Rabbi Yossi is like Rabbi Yehuda, because I can also argue that kan loik amar Rabbi Yossi hachem here in Sukkah. Yes, it's a doiraisa, but look at what we're doing. Ela b'sukkah, that's relative to other biblical mitzvahs. This is only a mitzvah saseh. It's good to know that if a person dwells in a sukkah, if a person dwells outside a sukkah during the Yom Tov of Sukkahs, they won't even get malchus. They're not even violating a lav. It doesn't say don't dwell outside the sukkah. It says basukah station. We're not making light of a mitzvah saseh, but it's not punishable and based in at all. However, Abul Shabbos, since it's the Isser Skila, and we're not saying that if a person violates a rabbinic Shabbos, they're getting Skila, no, but they're going to get a Makas Mardus. In other words, you're beginning with a more severe mitzvah. And again, even a rabbinic violation will afford you some oynish in Beis Din, so it can be viewed as something more serious. So maybe like, okay, nukud. And now the Gemara has a problem. In other words, that when the Gemara is rejecting Rabbi Yochanan, and we're saying that even though Rabbi Yossi clearly in Sukkah subscribes to good achis, he will not necessarily subscribe to good achis when it comes to Shabbos. He'll be more machmir for Shabbos. If that is correct, then don't forget, guys, that the Rabbi Yossi was the Av Beis Din in Tzipoidi. And when we hear about stories that happened in the city of Tzipoidi, we could presume it was done based Shitas Rabbi Yossi. So if we are disconnecting, if we're not linking one with the other, the story that we will relate in a moment, Alpi Minasa was based on whom? Avadim was based on Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, 1 second. There was a story that we'll quote in a moment. After Rabbi Yossi's passing, there is Yerusha by Malchus, and there is Yerusha when it comes to Rabbanus, as it says even all the way in Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yossi's son, Rabbi Yishmael, was his Mamala Makim. Rabbi Yishmael made that link. I'm going to stand our ground that we're going to push back against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi Lavdafka will use good achis by Hilchas Shabbos. His son did use it. Says the Gemara, no, loyal P Rabbi Yossi. The story was not based on our Rabbi Yossi, LLP, Rabbi Yishmael be Rabbi Yossi, who did say that what my father said for Sukah, Rabbi Yishmael, will apply for Shabbos. Now, what was the story? The Chiyasi Rav Dimi once related that Tanach, there was a time that Shachachu v'lo Yeviu Sefer Torah Erev Shabbos. Rashi says that this story happened during the Roman persecution, and one of the things that they outlawed was reading from a Sefer Torah, especially on Shabbos. So what did people do? When they had a Beis HaKnesses or a Beis HaMedrash in a Chatzir, many batim opened up to that Chatzir, they would not begin Shabbos with the Sefer Torah being placed in the shul. They would have a Sefer Torah in someone's private home. They would leave it there. So if someone would check, they wouldn't find the Sefer Torah in the shul, but then they would have to bring it there for Shabbos. Now, one option would be to make an Eruv Chatzeres. This was left in a Chatzir that they never made an Eruv Chatzeres. Over there, they would bring it right before Shabbos. And one time it happened that they forgot to bring the Sefer Torah from a home into the Beis HaKnesses. Now, what do you do? So what they did was they had a Gavaldic thing. It happened to be that physically there was a way of creating a halachic corridor that would link the opening of that home into the opening of the Beis HaKnesses. And guys, even though that you can argue that the corridor is serving two domains, which is the home and the Beis HaKnesses, if you remember, a Beis HaKnesses is not considered a residential home. So a Beis HaKnesses and a home and a chatzir, if there's only two buildings, a shul and a home, you don't have to make an eruv chatzeres. So what they did is that they created they created Pashut, a corridor that only linked to the Beis HaKnesses and the home. That area doesn't need to have an Eruv Chatzeres. But they created that on Shabbos. That's what's mashma. Let's go read what happened. That Lamachar on Shabbos, Persu Sadinim al Gabe Hoamudim. There were poles, and they brought there. How did they bring it there is a problem. We're going to amend it in a moment. They brought sheets, and they suspended it over the poles, creating partitions. The Gemara takes it as a given, and we're not going to challenge that, is that these sheets did not go all the way down to the ground. All they did is that they created a 10 tefach height with the sheet. So now you have a corridor into which only one home and one Beis HaKnesses opens. You don't have to make an Eruv Chatzeres. They brought it and they read from it. Now, that's the story. If you would not allow good achis mechitzta, you would not create a corridor. It would not be good enough. So that is from where we know that in Sipleidi they did use good achis even for Hilchos Shabbos. And again, the Gemara already gave the answer. The Gemara says, no, it's not Rabbi Yossi. We reject Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi did not agree. His son Rabbi Yishmael took it even to Shabbos. Now, just a detail on the story. Persu Salka Daitach, don't repeat the story the way you did, because Mehechen Evion the Shabbos. They must have brought it from another home in the Chatzar. They didn't make an Eruv Chatzeres. That was the story there. So then no one would be allowed to take sheets and bring it from a home into the yard. Ella, what happened was Mitzoi Sadin and Perusim Al Gabe Amudim. The sheets were already near on the poles, but they were not properly suspended. They probably did it the other weeks as well. So what they did is that the whole chiddush there is that they created a mechitza, right? They suspended this mechitza on Shabbos. That's a whole other topic. If you remember, oil arai is problematic midrabanan, but that's not called an oil. The sadinim were already there, right? They added to this type of building is permitted on Shabbos, but they didn't carry the sadinim there, and they found it there al gabi amudim. And now that they suspended it on Shabbos, yes, Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yossi used good achis mechitztam to paskin that's proper mechitzos, and therefore they viu sefer Torah and v'karuboy. They brought it and they read. There's an added chiddush. Sometimes you bring a sefer Torah, but other members in the shul will disagree with this heter, and they're going to shout you down. Hey, you're not allowed to use a sefer Torah. People were machal Shabbos with it. Everyone agreed that was okay. Okay. Amar Rab Chizda Amar Avimi. Let's go weiter. And here he's speaking about a sukkah that had exactly 10 tfachim of height. Machatzeles arbo mashu. If you have a mat, now we're going to be suspending this mat vertically, even if the mat only has 4 tfachim and a bit, 4 tfachim and a bit, and we're saying that you have to have a 10 tefach mechitza. And then you can for sure say good asik, perhaps according to Rabbi Yossi, say good achis. He says, really, you don't even need 10 tvachim. If it's 4 and a bit, materes besukah, you can use that in a sukkah, and you're going to create a bona fide doifin. You're going to create a wall. How do you create a wall? So it's very simple, says the Gemara, because lavud means that if something is within 3 tvachim from its adjacent area, it's as if it's annexed. So since, yes, the sukkah has exactly 10 tvachim of height, if the mat itself is 4 and a bit means that you're lacking less than 6 to come to the full 10 tvachim. So if you put it exactly in the middle, making sure that it's less than 3 tvachim from the ground, it's less than 3 tvachim from the roof, from the schach, then because of lavud, we view it as if it's 10 tvachim. Heichin avid lei, how do you do it? That heichi avid, tali lei, you suspend it exactly be'emtza, making sure pachas mishlei shalamato, pachas mishlei shalamayla. And since we have this rule, v'chol pachas mishlei shekalavadami, so therefore it's considered a proper wall. And the Gemara is going to say, not only is this correct, but it's simple, pshita. Why did we even need him to teach us? We lavud. So the Gemara says, no, there is a big chiddush here. Because Mal the Tema, one might have argued, chad lavud omrina. To say lavud here in one scenario, we'll use lavud once. Today, lavud on the same wall at the same time, maybe lo yomrina. So Komash Malan, that we use lavud twice on the same wall. Says the Gemara, makes Svei have a problem with this. If that's correct, why did we learn in a Braisa that machatzel is shivo mashu, that if you have a mat that's only 7 and a bit, that's materes besukah mishum doifi. Mashma, yeah, you don't have to have taka 10, only 7 and a bit. You chap already, the 7 and a bit means that from one of the sides, you're going to use lavut, but only one side, not 4 and a bit, 7 and a bit. Answers the Gemara, nah. That Braisa speaking about a Sukah gedoyla, not in width and length, gedoyla in height, that if there is a properly tall Sukah, guys, you can't have lavud twice if it's not within 3 tfachim from both sides. So when it's taka very tall, you can only use lavud once. Then that's not enough. That for sure, use lavud once. You don't really need for the doifim to be 10. It should be 7 and a bit, and put it, whether you're going l'shitas and Rabbi Yosi, put it within 3 tfachim from the top. So now you have a 10 tefach halachic wall. And umay komash malan. Now l'chayre, if it's a tall sukkah and you're only using lavud once, then again we know where you can use lavud. The chiddush will be, the author of this brais will be Rabbi Yosi. His point is that you can even suspend it within 3 from the roof, because we do say good achis. We make the mechitza go down. Or my kamash malan, the mishalshal and the fanis milmayla lamato, because this Tana is following Rabbi Yosi. If this would not be Rabbi Yosi, then we would not even need a brayser from it. Now the final din. Now that we're speaking about lavud, we're going to go me'inyan le'inyan. We're not going to go to the height of a wall, but we're going to go to the length or the width of a wall. And what did we learn above? That if you have 2 proper walls, the third guy's daf zayin, theoretically the third wall halacha l'meishu b'sin, it can be 1 tefach. But let's not forget that we also had various doubts whether there is a need to add to it. It's Sudas HaPesach, you remember. And what we did conclude is that as long as you have the third wall 7 tfachim, then you're good. Even though the sukkah on that side of the sukkah is much more than 7 tfachim. And here also we said the same concept, that you really don't even need a 7 tefach third wall. You only need to have a halachic 7 tefach third wall. How do you do that? As long as the past at the board, we're not focusing on the height, we're focusing on the width, is going to be 4 tefach and a bit, not the full 7. It's also going to be matir b'sukkah mishum doifen. Why is that? Because since you put it within 3 tfachim from one of the 2 other right angle walls, and therefore the rule is v'chol pachas misleish samach l'doifen kalavu dami, and therefore again you have yourself a proper third wall. And here again, if you're only using lavud once, Mela in the Braisa above we said because they put the doifen near the schach. And Rabbi Yosi is adas yachid, but over here using lavud from side to side, lavud it's within 3. You don't have to add. There's no good achis over here. So Michael Mashmalan. So the last line of the Amid is no. There's the chiddush, guys. Daf zayin. Again, halacha l'maishim Sinai. The third doifen only has to be 1 tefach. On the other hand, we learned, and that's midrabanan, that you needed maybe to do a tzuras HaPesach. It wasn't so simple. He had all those shitas over there. If you remember, 3 statements of Rava. So his vart is Hakamash Malan, that once you have a 7 tefach third wall, even though the sukkah goes beyond that a lot, even midrabanan you're good, but you have to have 7 tefachim. So that's really it's the fact that you can create 7 tefachim by using lava. That's a given. His chiddush was that unlike other versions in Rava, that when you only have a third wall that's smaller, you have to still create a tzuras HaPesach until the end. You don't say that if you have a 7 tefach wall. Hakamash malan, that shiur meshach sukah ketana, and we're speaking here about the third little side, because if the sukkah is only 7 by 7, then there's no chiddush at all. The sukkah can be 20 miles long. You have 2 proper walls, right angle. Now you're only adding a third wall. Even midrabanan, you only have to make the smaller size. And what is the smaller size? 7. You don't need a tzuras HaPesach further. I'll tell you more than that. Don't forget, guys, this is one of the unique cases that we follow Beis Shammai. According to Beis Hillel, the smaller size sukkah is 6 by 6. According to that, even midrabanan, all you need to do is to create a 6 tefach. He's paskening. No, the pas has to be in a way that you come out with a halachic seventh small wall, because yes, it has to be 7, but once you have this, the third wall 7 tfachim wide, then l'kula alma, even midrabanan, you got yourself a proper sukkah. Chevra, to be continued. I'm gonna make another coffee. I'm coming right back. Right back.
We're doing a double today?
We have to, yes.
Yes. Possibly triple.
It's always a
You think we started at 5 a.m. just for the fun of it?
What's that?
You thought we started at 5 just for the fun? We just wanted to get up an hour early, you know?
So when's the next year? Would be Monday, right?
Monday also double. He wants to start at 5:05 on Monday. That way we get the 2 that we missed from Sunday.
You mean 8:05? Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Yes, correct. I'm glad that you can smile and laugh about it.
I hear your groggy voice. Maybe you should go get another coffee too.
I just did. I've had 3 shots. You're going to be wired.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for all these people that have been sleeping the last hour.
No, I'm up. Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Rabbi?
Yeah, I'm here.
I didn't really understand the answer of when you said, okay, we use loved on top and on bottom. And then the Gemara asked, well, that's obvious. Okay, 3 and 3 ways. Sure, loved works both ways. So the answer was that, well, in a big sukkah, then you would have to, I didn't really understand.
No, Danny. Not a big sukkah. The chiddush is that you use loved both ways. That's it. That's the answer. There was another problem. The other problem is that now that we established you can use loved twice on the same wall, why did the Brisa say that the chiddush, that the machatzelis only has to be 7 and a bit? The Brisa should have said the machatzelis has to be even just 4 and a bit.
Right.
So that the Gemara answer, no. That if the sukkah is much taller than 10 tefachim, then of course you have to have 7 and a bit. In other words, you can theoretically use loved twice only if it's within 3 tefachim from both sides.
Got it. Okay.
Does anybody have a picture where we can look up the difference between lavud and good achis and all the different?
Lovud just means it has to be within 3 tzemach. 3 tefach.
And good achis?
Good achis means once you have a halachic 10 tefach wall, it can be a mile away from the schach. Good asik, or according to Rabbi Yossi, it can be a mile away from the floor. Good achis.
Not a mile if it's more than 20 amas, but
I stand corrected. Danny is right. Well, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it can be a mile.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's start. Here we go.
Wait, you have 2 more minutes. 6:05.
Okay. I'll wait 2 more minutes. Stand corrected. Yeah, Azman is Azman, Khair. It's important. You know, this is like chulin, guys, because it's like it's a very hands-on topic. You're building. We're builders now. Macht vent. So, guys, we're aiming again just right now that Monday morning to do the same thing. And Tuesday morning back to normal. Can sleep in. Okay. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Yud Zayin Daf Toiv. We're going to start on top of the Amid with the Mishnah. Up until now, we have been learning about the din of lavud, how it's applied to a vertical gap, whether it is from top to bottom, whether it is from side to side, as we learned in the end of the Gemara on Daf Tezayin Amid Beis. And now we're going to continue to apply to what happens to schach when the schach and the walls are not touching each other horizontally. And to add something, that there are many whose girsa, the rif, that the top line of what we will start learning today is not in the Mishnah Daf Yud Zayin. It's not the beginning of a new Mishnah, but it's really the ending of the Mishnah of Daf Tezayin. And we'll speak out that this really is a bigger topic of whether we are allowed to put together two halacha l'Moshe Messinais or not, as we'll explain. Now we will learn in our Mishnah the din of a doifen akum, of the bent wall. And finally, we're recording this often. The question will be, how much open space in the schach invalidates the sukkah, and how much invalid schach will invalidate the sukkah? We're not even speaking about that if you have invalid schach, we already learned in the roiv, then the whole sukkah is invalid. But we're going to be speaking about a sukkah that has three walls. And if you have either open space that's going across the entirety of the length of the sukkah, or the width, you have to see the pictures. Or if you have pasal schach that goes throughout the sukkah, if it's going to consider that into two separate sukkahs, if it's going to break up the sukkahs, then in many cases, if it's going towards the length, in all cases towards the length, either side will only have two walls. And as we will see, that there's really a machloikis, there's two girsas of the machloikis, but let's begin with the general rule that open space, avir, pasels the sukkah, even if it's only 3 tfachim or more of open space. Pasel schach will invalidate the sukkah only if it's 4 tfachim of invalid schach. But again, there's going to be a machloikis if these measurements are correct. Maybe by pasel schach you need to have 4 amas. There's going to be 2 versions as to who said what. And another very important topic of Daf Yud Zayin will be the topic of combinations, of being mitzdarif. That means if you have let's say a gap that's not 3 tfachim, it's less than 3 tfachim. Let's go with the version that pasel schach is only if it's 4 tfachim wide. What happens if you have these 2 areas adjacent to each other? You have 2.5 tefach of open space. Right nearby it, there is 2 tefach of pasel schach. Do we combine them together? By say you have a totality of 4 tfachim. Will that invalidate the sukkah? Or, as the Gemara will make it clear, that whenever you have items that are subject to different measurements, or dinim that are subject to different measurements, there's the din of avir, there's the din of schach pasel, they do not combine. And that sukkah will not be viewed as 2 separate sukkahs, and much, much more. Let us start on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph from top line by the Mishnah. Now, our girsa is that last Mishnah's last din was quoting the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. Last Mishnah was using lavud, not lavud, the end of the Mishnah was using good asik or good achis. That was the din of the Mishnah. Our Mishnah is going to go back to lavud, but lavud not vertically, that we know already, but lavud horizontally. What's that lavud horizontally? You have a proper sukkah, you have 3 walls or more, but on, let's say, 3 walls, and the schach of one side doesn't touch the wall. So what's going to be the din? Well, says the Mishnah that hirchik es hasichuch min atfanis. If the schach is away from one entire wall, if you have 3 walls and the schach doesn't touch one entire wall, then you only have 2 walls. How far is it? 3 tfachim or more, then that entire sukkah is possible, because that sukkah only has 2 walls. What is the Mishnah implying? That if the schach comes within 3 tfachim from the wall, that we say lavud horizontally, and you got yourself 3 walls. Now, according to the rif that has this line in the Mishnah, connected to the Mishnah Daf Tezayin that's speaking about good achis or let's go Lakula Alma Gud Asik, here is the big question, my friends. What happens if a person is using Gud Asik, which we use? That means that the mechitza, the third mechitza, is only, it's touching the ground and it only goes up 10 tfachim. The schach is many times, many more tfachim above it. But the schach doesn't come to right above this halachic Gud Asik mechitza. It comes within 3 tfachim from this halachic wall. The Rif, by placing the din over here of lavud horizontally, connected to the Mishnah that's speaking about Gud Asik, puts it there or learns from the fact that Rabbeinu HaKadosh put it together, because he holds that you put together 2 halacha l'meishem sinais, that we could say at the same time Gud Asik. I make believe there's a wall, but the schach doesn't even touch that halachic wall. So what? If it is within 3 tfachim of it, then you also say lavud, that you could, we say lavud and Gud Asik together. Many Rishonim argue. Many Rishonim hold that we cannot say these 2 halacha l'meishem sinais at the same time. And they don't hold that this line was on Daf Tezayin. They have our girsa. This is a new Mishnah. Either that or this, but not at the same time, both. That's a very interesting machlokes. Let's go weiter. So din number 1 is implying, it's a mashmois, teaching you lavud horizontally. Now, another din, which is also going to be taught in a way of inference, bias, and we're going to have really 3 cases. If you have a house, shenifchas, that the roof was breached, not the whole roof, but the middle of the roof. And you now, I have a hole in my dining room ceiling, I might as well sit here for sukkahs. The sichech al gabov, you put proper schach. What is the issue? The issue is, again, we're speaking here about horizontal. Now, we just said lavud. But lavud is only needed if there is empty space. Here, there is no empty space. Here you have the part of the roof that did not breach. So here we tolerate much more of non-breached roof for us to still be able to say that the wall of the side of the house is the wall to the sukkah. What is the limit? Says the Mishnah. Only if there's 4 amas space. Only then do you say it's possible. Again, what we are teaching a rule by inference, meaning that as long as the wall is within 4 amas, it's 4 amas minus a millimeter. Even though the schach, forget about with lavud, it's very far away, guys. 1 amma, let's say 6 tfachim, not within 3 tfachim. It's 3 amas plus 5 tfachim. You're still good. Why? Doifen akuma. Because we say that the wall is the wall to that side. Now that is enough. That is one example that should have been enough to teach you the din of doifen akuma. That we say doifen akuma.
The roof, the invalid schach, that's the roof, is part of the wall. That's what we're saying.
We
right?
say that the roof is part of the wall, and we are using the wall for that side of the sukkah, the wall of the house. I love it. You don't need lavud here because you have a physical roof. The roof connects it. Either roof is not a wall. We consider it a wall up until, as long as it's less than 4 amas. Now, same thing here also. Just like we learned in the previous Gemara, we can say on the same wall lavud twice. We can say doifen akuma in the same sukkah as many times as you need it. In other words, sometimes the roof was breached already at a corner. Already at a corner means that you have 2 walls that are near it. So use it once. If you want, you can use it on all 3 walls in the same time, at the same time. Now, another example. The Gemara will explain why we need another example. If you have a courtyard that is surrounded by porches, guys, if you have a picture, you don't need a picture. A picture will help over here. Now, the porches protrude. The porches they go over the middle of the courtyard. And now someone goes ahead and he simply lays the schach over the roofs of the porches. The porch is for the people that live upstairs. But if you're downstairs, you look up, you have this protrusion, you have this overhang. You use that again for the base of your schach. What is the disadvantage? Is that the schach is not touching the walls. So the same thing will be over here. That what? That as long as you have less than 4 amas from the wall of the house, from the bottom house, until the beginning of the schach, we can use the walls of the houses for the schach. Doifen akuma. Case number 3, Sukah gedoyla sheikifur b'davar she'emesachin boy. You have a very large sukkah, and for some reason you put up schach that's puzzle. Puzzle is schach. And where did you put it? You put it around all of the periphery. The kosher schach is not touching any of the walls. Here also, only im yesh tachtav arba ames psula. Meaning that if the kosher schach is within 4 amas, there's less than 4 amas until the walls, those walls could be used. 1 wall, 2 wall, all 3 walls, doifen akuma. 3 cases. The case of bayis shenifchas, the house that was breached, the case of the chatzar, and the case of a large sukkah that you placed pasal schach. And the Gemara wants to know, kol hanalamali, why did we have to give 3 examples? It's really just teaching one din, the din of doifen akuma. So the Gemara says, no, I need tzrich, I needed all 3 cases. Because the ashmi inan bayis shenifchas, if the Mishnah only would have given the first case, the house whose roof was breached, because the walls in the house were built to be a mechitza for the inside room. So it's easier to use to say it's still a wall. You have a wall to the sukkah. They were made and they continue to be a wall for the inner area. It's not close enough. Doifen akuma. Avol chatzer, the gavaldik. Hamu kefasach sadra. Don't forget, guys, the porches, right? The mechitza is lav lach sadra vida. The walls were originally built, right? The walls were built for the house. The walls were built for the house. The walls were not built to afford protection to the area in the courtyard. The courtyard is open. So here you're using the wall for an area that the wall was not made for. So you might have thought, well, if the schach goes until the wall, there's not a problem. But to say doifen akuma, nah, maybe not. So that's why we needed to give the second case. The Mishnah only given the first 2 cases. I would have thought mishum the sichachan schach kasherhu, because at least the schach that you are putting on is kosher. Now, what's important over here is that the din of the Mishnah of bayis shenifchas, this is important. What happens if you build a home and the roof, guys, is really kosher schach? It's not going to be used for a sukkah because it was put l'shem bayis. And we already learned above that if schach was put l'shem bayis, it's halachically not good for schach. But it can even be speaking about material that is not inherently invalid. So there's a lesser issue with the schach. It was an intent issue. And as we said, tasav aloy min ha'asui. And by the way, even without using doifen akuma, if that would be the case in bayis shenifchas, there would be another solution. The other solution would be lift it up and put it back down. Put it down, l'shem schach, l'shem sukkah, or l'shem sichuch, which is enough l'beis hillel. The third case of the Mishnah was to emphasize that even if that which is separating the kosher schach from the walls is not something that does not have a inherent invalidation, even if it's schach puzzle, you put metal beams. The Mishnah clearly writes this schach puzzle. Maybe here again we would not use doifen akuma. So that's the case of the Mishnah that you need to write. Even in such a scenario, we say doifen akuma. We always say doifen akuma. As long as there is something on the roof, cannot be open space, and that something doesn't separate the kosher schach 4 amas. It's a bit less than 4 amas. Then the wall of the side is viewed as the wall of that side of the sukkah. It's not that, guys, we're not moving the wall, Rashi wants to point out. We're leaving the wall where it is. We're considering the wall to touch all the way that edge of the schach because it touches by the roof. Okay. Here we begin, Chava. Version number 1. Amar Rabba. I want you to know that Ashkachtinu L'Rabbanan the Beit Rav. I once met Talmidim of Rav. And the Yosvi V'Ka'amrin, they were telling me, obviously, they were telling me the opinion of their teacher Rav, that what? That when you have Avir, so here the case will be, guys, you have a 3-walled sukkah, and somewhere in middle of the schach, you have open space. No, not that because of the open space, now the totality of the sukkah has more sunlight than shade. No, even though there's open space, even though that's not the picture, I don't want to go here, even though it may find another picture where it's going in the other direction, even though there's open space, you still have more shade than sunlight. But if there is a gap of 3 tfachim, that's going across the entire length of the sukkah, if you can just put this in your mind, that you have 3 walls, so then what that open space does is that it renders one sukkah into 2 sukkahs. And neither sukkah has 3 walls. Avir, Poisel, you know how much open space needs there to be for you to consider this to be separated. I don't like these pictures. I'll tell you why I don't like the, leave it up. I just want to explain. If the open airspace is going across the width, then the inner sukkah is kosher. The inner sukkah, because the inner sukkah is going to have 3 walls. That's why I don't know why they made that picture. It's a mistake to make that picture. The picture is when it goes across the length, then nothing is good. Because
this is the one I sent you.
Because no side has 3 walls. It's the same concept. However, this is what they're quoting Rav. What happens? The same thing, and in the middle of the schach, they put down pasal schach. So it doesn't have that. Whoever's seeing the screen, that's a much better picture, in my opinion, because all what you're seeing over here is that since there is avir that goes all the way across the length, look at it. Either side only has 2 walls. No sukkah has 3 walls. No sukkah has 3 walls. But if it's less than 3 tfachim, now guys, if it's less than 3 tfachim, but the schach on the remainder is so sparse that you have in the sukkah more sunlight than shade, it's also going to be puzzle. Make no mistake. We're speaking about a scenario that even with the open space, the areas that do have a covering have a lot of covering, a lot of schach. You will always have here silasa, meruba mechamasa, but you have to have 3 walls. Now comes along Talmid de Rav, and they say like this, that if the area that's open is not open, but it's chach pasol, there is also a break-off point where we say, upa, it's 2 separate sukkahs, but it's not 3 tfachim. It's not enough to go out of lavud. You need to have 4 tfachim. Arba, guys, with the hay, just to know, if it would be arba, it would mean amas. Arba is tfachim. That is what the Talmidim of Rav said in the name of Rav, and Rabba disagreed. I told them, no. I don't understand. Where did you get it from? You got all that luchura from our Mishnah. Well, if that's the case, now guys, we learned the Mishnah the way Talmid that Rav learned it. We learned the Mishnah that the breach in the Bayish and Nifchas and in the other cases is only in the center. It's in the center. And because of the din of Doifen Akuma, we tolerate a distance under 4 amas. Correct, guys, we learned it correct. But Rabbah didn't learn it that way. And Rabbah wondered, where did Rav get that from? If he learned it from the inference from our Mishnah, then he should have come to a different conclusion. Rabbah understood that if you have schach pesula, it only separates the sukkah if it's 4 amas, not because of doifen akuma. Let's read it inside. You'll see where he's coming from. So Rabbah challenged them. I don't understand. Avir the poisel besukkah bishloisha, that if it's 3 tfachim, where do you get it from? Well, you got it from our Mishnah, because it says in our Mishnah, so that infers, that implies that what? And by the way, again, it's not about lavud. He understood all of this. It's not about lavud and not about doifen akuma. It's how much air space will separate one part from the other. Our Mishnah says 3 tfachim. Clear. Well, if that's the case, schach pasul nami lelifshel ela ba'arba amas, from our same Mishnah, again, from the inference of our Mishnah. The Tanan we learned in our Mishnah, Bayish nifchas and v'sich al gabov, im yesh ben sichuk l'koisel dalad amas psula, implying that if it's less than dalad amas, it's not pasul. And Rabbah understood, do you know why it's not pasul? Not because of doifen akuma. Because as long as you don't have a break of 4 amas, it doesn't separate the sukkah. You have all the 4 walls. So for Amru Li, right away the Talmid de Rav told me, Rabbah, no, Bar Minodai, take that back. You quoting our Mishnah is a mistake, because we learned the Mishnah correctly. The Rav and Shmuel Amri Tarvayu, that the pshat in our Mishnah, really the pshat of all the 3 cases, we're just picking the first case of Bayish and Nifchas, is only because of Doifen Akuma Naguma. Yeah, if you have a wall, our Mishnah is not speaking about how much Pasal Eschach will break the sukkah into two. Our Mishnah is simply telling you the din that doif and akuma is only tolerated up until 4 amas. The moment it is 4 amas or more, no more doif and akuma. But if you have Pasal Eschach in middle of the sukkah and you're not subscribing to doif and akuma, so then much less of Pasal Eschach will break the sukkah into 2, and that is 4 tvachim. Now, guys, Rabba had a great question on them. Rabba tells them, hold on, I have a problem with that. What happens, you guys, you have a sukkah. Forget about lavud, forget about doif and akum. You have a huge sukkah. And right in the middle, that the way we had a picture going across the length, you had 2 problems, one mamish on the side of the other, one congruent with the other. You have less than 4 tfachim of pasal eschach, less. And that goes into ba'avir, another strip of space that has nothing in it. Pachus mishloish. Now, what would you think? Guys, think about this. You look up, you're middle of the sukkah. You still have in this sukkah more shade than sunlight. Okay, I'll take that picture. Even though I don't like the direction, we'll take that picture. So, L'chora, says Rabbah, guys, what is a more potent invalidator? Empty space or pasal eschach? Well, Talmidei that Rav are saying that empty space, because even only 3 tvachim invalidates. So he has a gavaldik logic. He says if you have pasal eschach that's right under 4 tvachim, if adding a little bit of pasal eschach will make it 4 tvachim and invalidate it, then empty space, which is a more potent invalidator, should be added to the pasal eschach, and it should be pasal, but it's not. Why would it not be? Now you're going to right away ask, how is Rabba's opinion better? Just because Rabba says that by schach pasal the limit is 4 ames, you can have the same kasha on Rabba, which we'll have. What happens according to Rabba if there's a little bit less than 4 ames adjacent to 3 tvachim of empty space? I know that. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's read it inside. So I told them, no. Again, if you have a little bit less than 4 tvachim of pasal eschach, right away neighboring a little bit less than 3 tvachim of avir, the din is ksheira, because neither of the shiurim hit the amount for it to invalidate. But why? Why would you not combine it? Like if malyan b'shapudim if you would only add 1, you have 4 tvachim minus an inch. If you would add 1 inch of a metal spit or any other pasal eschach, then psula, because now that you added pasal eschach, now you have the 4 tvachim. Well, says Rabba, avir apaisel b'shloisha. Well, avir itself, which is like we said, a more potent invalidator, what that should for sure be just as bad as kischach pasal apaisel ba'arba. And why would you not combine it? And we don't combine it. But why would we not combine it? So right away, Talmidei the Rav tells Rabba, I don't understand. You have a kasha, but that kasha has nothing to do with our teacher. Why don't you ask the question on yourself? I mean, Rav also says that the shiur of avir is even more potent, because according to Rabba, he was maida that 3 tvachim of avir pasals. Rabba holds, according to this version, that 4 ames of pasal eschach pasals. So ask the same question on yourself. So v'amru li iyachi li dedachnami. The amrat schach pasal is pasal ba'arba ames. You got yourself the same problem, same exact case. What's going to happen? Now, guys, I'm just saying this because once you have, I'm saying something technical, that the scenario according the kasha against the Rav is that you have almost 4 ames of pasal eschach. Guys, everyone needs to have silasa miruba machamasa. Doesn't matter. We're speaking about always where that's covered. And the concept of bittul b'roiv. All of the items that we learned before were covered. I know they have to be taken into account. We're going to focus only on this aspect, that if halachically it separates the sukkah, then you broke the sukkah into 2, and you don't have 3 walls, or you don't break it into 2. And then if all of the other prior requirements are met, then you have yourself a kosher sukkah. Ma'ilu ikas chach apostle pachus midalad ames. What's going to happen if you have almost the bad amount? Almost 4 ames. 4 ames minus an inch. And right next to it, you have avir, and the avir is not 3 tvachim. It's less than 3 tvachim. Pachus mishleishim. So you also would say the same thing, that it's kosher, because neither of these areas have their shiur. But why not? Why don't you combine them? Why should you combine them? Because you have to be moide, right? 4 lines from the bottom of the amid, that if malya b'shapudim, that if it's 4 amas minus an inch, and if you have a spit that has the width of an inch, and you put it down while it's possible, well, same thing. Ear space that is more potent, according to you, it's even more potent, because the contrast, the difference between 3 tvachim and 4 amas is much larger than our 3 tvachim to 4 tvachim. So why should that not be kischach pasla paisa ba'arba amas? And Abba says, no, that's my whole point. And Abba's kasha will be great. Says Rabba, second to last line, hi my haknishken kov. Don't compare one case to the other. I hold that the shiur of 4 amas of schach pasel is arba amos of invalid material, daf yud zayin omid beis. The shiur of avir is 3 tfachim. Both of these invalidations are connected to shiurim. And there's a rule, that's the premise of the whole amud, that 2 different measurements don't combine. Mishum shiurei, the lav shiurehu, inside the top Rashi. The shiur of arba amas, which is the shiur halacha l'moshe misinai that passes with schach pasel, and halacha l'moshe misinai less than that ain't a shiur lipso. Again, this is all Rabba. Rabba did not connect this to doifen akuma. Rabba, who learned the Mishnah, not connected to doifen akuma, which was Rabba's source from our Mishnah that it's only arba amas. Where did the Mishnah get it from? According to him, it's another din. It's a din that Moshe Rabbeinu was taught, that how much schach pasel separates the sukkah, arba amas. How much does avir pasel? 3 tfachim. 3 tfachim. So they are din in measurements, and there is a rule that when you have different measurements, different psulim are linked to different measurements, they're not mitzadef to invalidate. So I reject that whole kal v'chomer. It's not about more potent or less potent. They don't combine. But and therefore I love shiuru. But according to you, 1 second, and keeping the lav shavel shiurayu, since these 2 shiurim are not equal, schach pasul arba amas, avir gimel tfachim. So therefore, let me start. But according to your understanding of the Mishnah, and guys, according to Talmidei de Rav, our Mishnah spoke about doifen akuma. Our Mishnah spoke about airspace. Where did the Rav get the shiur of schach pasul 4 tfachim? Nowhere. He did not get it from a Tana. If it's written in the Tana, then it's halacha l'moshe misinai. It's a logic. It's not about that God said that this amount of schach pasul, this shiur is going to invalidate. What's his logic? His logic is that when things are separated one from the other, we found so much in Hilchas Shabbos, right? For all of the Reshuyos, something that's less than 4 tfachim is garnished. Remember, you learned the whole day. The Akira and the Hanach has to be from Daled by Daled tfachim. In other words, it's about haflug, it's about separation, and it's a logic. Rashi 6 lines from the top of the Amid. That's what Rabba's challenging Talmidei de Rav is loitanan luhu b'masnisim li'in schach pasel. It's only a svara. Rabba understood that if he didn't get it from a Mishnah, it was a svara. What's the svara? The svara is Rashi writes the b'chol mokim chashuvim dalat tfachim liyois mokim chashuv la'atzmai. So if it's based on a svara that once you hit 4 tfachim, that's called a mokim chashuv. So it's about when one part of the sukkah is muflag, separated from the other, there has to be a point where you consider them separated. If it's a svara of haflaga, why wouldn't empty space add to the separation? It should. Let's read it inside. So mali ispalig b'schach pasul, mali ispalig b'schach pasul ve'avir. Note, by the way, the fact that when it comes to open airspace, you say that even if it's 3 tfachim, it's a problem, even more. But that's because it's open, and that's a Mishnah. But that's because it's empty space. Svara is that if you have anything on the roof, even though it's puzzle, you need more. But when you have the amount of 4 tfachim, even if you have to combine it with an avir, why would you not combine it? There are no dinei shiurim here. That's why Rabbi has a kasha against Talmidei de Rav, and for that they had no answer. So at Kan, just to be aware, the first version is that Talmidei de Rav are the ones that say that Avir b'shloisha tfachim, and Avir parcel separates both sides with only 4 tfachim, and Rabba holds Moide by Avir 3 tfachim, and by Schach Pesula, no, Schach Pesula will only invalidate to separate just for that aspect if it's 4 amas. Now, before we go to the second version of what Rav holds and what Rabba holds, so Gemara now based on this premise of Rabba, that when you have different shiurim, when it comes to psulim, they do not combine. Amar lei Abaye, he's speaking to his teacher Rabba. Ulamar nami, hold on. Even according to you, you're right that you have different shiurim for Avir, a different shiur for Schach Pasul, but practically that's only relevant when you have a sukkah that doesn't have the minimum amount of 7 by 7. But when you have a sukkah ketana, when you have a sukkah that's exactly 7 by 7, mi loy shavu b'shiurayu, will they in that case not shear the same shear, and that will be 3 tfachim? And guys, this is important. If you have 2 different psulim, even if they shear, even if they have in common the same shiur, in one scenario, that's enough for them always to combine, as we'll see in a moment. Now, why would Abaye say that if a sukkah has exactly 7 by 7, then whether it's an avir or whether it's chach pasul, in either case, Rabba should hold that the problem is by 3 tfachim? Let's read inside the Rashi, 50 lines from the top of the Rashi says Gavaldi. Mili shavu shiurayu. Al karchach, says Rashi, echad zeh ve'echad zeh, whether if you have exact 7 by 7, whether you have open space, or whether you have 3 tfachim, only 3 tfachim, no matter where it's placed, of schach pasul, that the psul is connected to the shear of 3 tfachim. In other words, the moment you can no longer use lavud, you got yourself a problem. Why is that? So Rashi writes, because the moment kivan and having lavud, so 3 tfachim, if you only have 7 by 7, will certainly create a scenario where the sukkah does not have its minimum shear. In other words, you have to have a minimum size. So lavud is mamash, you annex it. The moment you can't use lavud, you don't have 7 by 7. You don't have 7 by 7. And that's a svara. And no one is going to challenge that. So here again, I get it. Rabbah says like this: whenever there are shiurim that are different, you can't combine them. But if there is even only one scenario where 2 types of psulim shear, they have in common the same measurement, they should always combine. And by a minimum size sukkah, whether it's open space or whether it's chach psula, 3 tfachim will invalidate both. So then they should vaited always combine. Let's read it inside. Amar lei, to which Rabbah responded to it, but besukah gedayla, so answers Amar lei, answers Rabbah to Abaye, no. Over there, you're right. If a sukkah is exactly 7 by 7, and some chacham put on the schach psula, it invalidates the sukkah, even if it's only 3 tfachim. But why does it invalidate the sukkah? Not because it divides the sukkah in half, and therefore neither half has the right amount. Hassan lav mishum the shavu shiurai ladodi. The invalidation is not because it shares the same measurement. It's only because the leisei l'shiyurei the sukkah. I agree that if you have the minimum size, you have to have at least the minimum size. You have to have 7 by 7. Now, if you have a break that's less than 3 tfachim, lavud is very powerful. But the moment you can't use lavud, they are puzzled, not because they have the same shiur, is because you don't have a sukkah with the minimum size. But the shiur of gimel tfachim, never, of avir, never will be the same with schach psula. Schach psula only separates the sukkahs according to Rabbah, based on our Mishnah, when there's 4 amas. And that's why they don't combine. And now the Gemara is going to tell you, are you telling me, let's go to this premise, that when you have different shiurim, for different items, they can never combine. This goes against the Mishnah and Kalim. Guys, we quote this Mishnah many times. What's the Mishnah? The Mishnah is speaking about the minimum size beged that can acquire Tumas Midras. Tumas Midras means that if a Zav or a Zava and the others that have that power to impart this high level of Tumah, if they sit or lie upon something that was made to be sat or lied upon, that item acquires Tumah on the level of the source. So the Zava is a Av, the item becomes an Av. Now, how big does a beged have to be for you to argue that it was made to be sat upon? Now, guys, the 3x3 that we mentioned in the last daf, in the last year, that was concerning a whole different din. It was not concerning midras, because midras has to be more than the 3 finger breast. And the 3 finger breast, we're speaking about a beged that is made to be sat upon. In the other times that we mentioned 3 finger breadths, we were speaking about a patch, just to know that detail. Here, the 3, you'll see, is 3 tvachim. So it says in a Mishnah, ha beged, what's the minimum size beged? And by the way, beged doesn't mean any fiber. It's dafkat semer or pishtan shloisha, female tvachim, al shloisha, that if you have a beged or even a patch that is smaller than 3x3 tvachim, you can't see, this is good for a patch, but it was not made to be sat upon. But if it has that shiur, and you have the people that have the koyach to impart tumas midras, yes, that beged will acquire of the tumas midras. When it comes to a material that's made out of sack, out of goat hairs, there, the minimum size is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. If you have a piece of hide, then the shear is even bigger. It has to be at least 5 tvachim by 5 tvachim. And the biggest shear that we also mentioned in the last year regarding a mat, mapot's 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. Okay, so first of all, each one of these materials have a different measurement: 3x3, 4x4, 5x5, or 6x6. Now comes a question: what happens if you have someone that sewed together a material that is part beged and part sack? Part sack, part oir, part mapots. Says the Braisa, the Tani Allah, that if you combine the beged and a sack, or a sack and a oir, or the oir and a mapots, says the Braisa, they combine one with the other. Now, guys, they only combine one with the other to complete the larger measurement. But they complete the larger measurement. So if you have a mapots, but it's not 6x6, it's only 5. It's 5x6. It's missing a tefach. If someone sewed onto it from any of the other materials, it will combine. Now, hold on. The whole premise of Rabba's challenge, of Rabba's response for himself, for me, there's no kasha, because by me, it's 2 different shiurim. They don't combine. Here, they do combine. So answers the Gemara. Over there, for one halacha, they combine. And it's mamish like we just learned above, that even if they only are connected, even if they only have in common the same measurement for one halacha, then they will always combine. That was the kasha that Abaya had regarding the Sukah Katana. Hassan over there, Kedektani Taiman, that Amar Rav Shimon, Taka, my Tam, Rav Shimon said, Rashbi said, why should they combine? They don't have the same shiur. Because there is one area, and that is if a person had a saddle, and you are actually creating a patch for a saddle. There, the din is that if you have a original beged, whatever it's made out of, and you are trimming it, by the way, that detail is important, because it's not about mental designation. Here, when it comes to trimming, you are actively doing something. That has a greater power to be machshiv, even something that's smaller. Mental designation, what did we learn just in the Mishnah that we quoted? The minimum size is 3x3 tvachim, that's by tzemer and pishtin. But when you are actually trimming something for a purpose, here is, you want to you're creating a patch for the saddle of your donkey. So even if you only end up with 1 tefach on 1 tefach from all of the other materials, whether it is a beged, whether it is a sack, whether it is an oil, whether it is a mapots, if you have tefach by tefach, since again, it's not only a keli that you are intending for a purpose, but you actively made it, even though you didn't make it, but you're trimming it, but that's also called making it, then they all have the same measurement of 1 tefach. And that's the nakuda. So we are backing up the statement. 2 different psulim that share different shiurim, different measurements, can never combine. If even only for 1 halacha they have the same measurement, then they always combine. That's why the Mishnah says that if you have a beged and an oir, whichever one of these 2, they are mitzvah to make the larger measurement. Now, tefach al tefach lamay chazi. Why? What will a tefach al tefach be good for? Amar Rav Shmuel Lakish, Mishon Rav Yanai, hoyel v'ro'ui. One version is litaloi. Litaloi means to a patch, or our gersa here in the parenthesis, litloi al gaba hachamor. Okay, let's go right. Atkan chevre was the first girsa. First girsa is Talmidei derav were machalek avir shloisha tfachim schach pasul arba'a tfachim. Rabba holds avir paisel but gimel tfachim from our Mishnah, and he learned our Mishnah differently. He didn't learn our Mishnah not lavud nor the din of doif and akuma, but the din of our Mishnah is about the shiur, the measurement for schach psula arba amois. However, so Besura, they learned, as we just said, but in the city of Nardo, they had a whole different version. What was the other version? Masnu, they learned the following: that Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Schach pasel be'emsa, paisel ba'arba'a. Here, Shmuel is saying that which Talmidei derav said above. And min atzad, taka because of doif and akuma, you have a lot greater tolerance. We tolerate up until 4 amos. Rav is the one that said what Rabba said before. Rabba Omar beim min atzad beim be'emsa, only 4 amos. And then also a lot will be a repetition, and a lot will not be. But now, based on this version of who said what, they challenge now Shmuel. They challenge Shmuel from the Mishnah we learned on Daf Yud Dalid. We learned in the Mishnah Nasan all of this. And if you put a board that's on top of the sukkah, that's wide 4 tfachim, it's kosher. Now hold on, says the Gemara Bishleim according to Rav, the second version that says beim be'emtza beim be'atzad arba ames. And guys, let's not forget that there is an issue with the board, but I don't care. Because schach pasol is only poisel ba'arba amas. But according to Shmuel, that says that even be'emtza ba'arba'a, if you have schach that's psula, then if it's 4 tfachim, it invalidates the sukkah. Then a Mike Sheda, this is the question is assuming that the board is in the center. So for that, the Gemara answers, we had this above already. No. The Mishnah Daf Yud Daled must be speaking about that the schach pasula was min atzad, and l'kula alma, it won't invalidate the sukkah because of doifen akuma. So as long as the invalid schach is less than 4 amos from the doifen akuma. Another question. Tashema, we learned in the Braisa, guys, we had all this above. Shnei sadinim, if you have 2 sheets, we're speaking about a sheet that's considered a keli, and it's not kosher schach. However, neither of them has the width of 4 tfachim, but you put 2 one near the other. Combined, you have the 4 tfachim. Shnei sadinim mitztarfim. However, the Braisa says shnei nesarim, 2 boards ein mitztarfim. If we learned the sugya, guys, we're speaking about the invalidation of a board. We learned that the Tanakam of this Braisa is Rebbe Yehuda. Now we have to go back quickly to Rav and Shmuel just to say Rav. According to Rav, even when it's 4 tfachim, according to Rebbe Yehuda, there's no problem. He rejects the whole Gezeras Tikra. He didn't subscribe to that because he learned that shot in Beis Hillel, and that's the Tanakama. And Meir says no, that Nesarim are Kesadinim. And now let's bring that Braisa into our discussion. Says the Gemara like this: Bishleim alahach Mishnah, according to version number 2, that Rav is the one that says bein be'emtza bein be'atzad. When does schach pasel a sukkah? By separating it only by arba ames. So let's understand now Pshat and Rebbe Meir. What does Rebbe Meir mean when he says that boards are like sheets, mitztarfin, meaning la arba ames? And indeed, once it's arba ames, that's the whole Pshat of it. It's going to invalidate the sukkah by separating it. However, Ella lahach lishna, but according to version number 1, right? The Amarav, not Rabbah, but Rav is the one that said that even be'emtza, if you have a board that's for any schach pasel, it's going to invalidate it. Now, I got it, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, there isn't a problem with boards, but let's understand Pshat in Rabbi Meir. So what is Rabbi Meir talking about? If the board has 4 tvachim, then the board itself is problematic. Rabbi Meir does ascribe to Gezeiras Tikra. It's anyways, one board is not good. Eloma, the boards don't have 4. If they don't have 4, then we use bamboo. Why should it be mitzdaref? Kana ba'almanino. So the Gemara answers, La'olam the isbuhu arba. And what does this brayso mean, Rabbi Meir, that it's mitzdaref? Again, it's not a problem of schach pasul, but you have to have walls. And if the kosher schach only begins 4 amos or more after a wall, then you can't use doif and akuma. And that's the meaning of Rabbi Meir. My mitzdaref l'arba amos min atzad. Right. Tashuma, we quoted this also above. That we learned in a brayso, if a person covered their sukkah with boards made out of cedar wood, really it's just an example. Here again, this is the topic of Gezeiras Tikra. So it says the brayso, guys, if you remember, we had a machlekes again, Rav and Shmuel, without reviewing all of it. This was the brayso that was substantiated. Tanya Kavasei de Shmuel. If you remember, Shmuel says that even Rabbi Yehuda's noida, that if the board is 4 tvachim, it's going to become invalid. The only machlekes I made Rabbi Yehuda is if the board doesn't have the 4 tvachim, and that's this brayso. If it has dalet divrei hakol, even Rabbi Yehuda holds its psula. Ein behem dalet. That's where you have a machlekes. Rav Meir says Gezeiras Tikra, even though people did not make construction with boards that narrow, but still poisul. And Rabbi Yehuda is machshir. Let's keep on going with the brayso. Daf Yud Ches. But zok the brayso moide Rabbi Meir she'im yesh bein neser leneser. Guys, this is clear. The whole kasha is based on the premise that according to Rav Meir, there's no difference between a board of 4 and a board less than 4. So this statement of Rav Meir is also referring to all types of boards, even if the board has 4 tvachim. So he says that im yesh bein neser leneser k'maloi neser, that if you remove every second board, those boards are problematic, even less than 4 and 4. As long as you put in between the boards sol means kosher schach, then it's kosher. With all of the details that we learned above, we have to combine different sugyas. Whether it's enough 50%, that's that other sugya that we just learned recently, or you have to have a majority. Good. Now come, this is Gaval. Bishlema says the Gemara Lamanda Amar Bein Be'emtza Bein Menatzad. Right, Bedalid Amis. The only time you have an invalidation is by 4 Amis. So since you don't have, right, there's no board that's less than 4 amas. So when it says Umoide Rabbi Meir, and again Umoide Rabbi Meir is regarding all boards that are mentioned in the brayso. The brayso mentioned a board of 4 tvachim and a board less than 4 tvachim. There's no mention of a board of 4 amas. That's why it works. Because as long as you don't have any board that's 4 amas, so it's not shaykh to this whole issue that we're learning about on Daf Yud Zayin. But according Lamanda Amar, that holds that once you have a board, forget about doif and akuma. That when you have a board itself, which is chach pasul. Don't forget, guys, this is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir subscribes to Gezeiras Tikra. A board that's 4 tvachim, not only according to this brayso, even less, is invalid. So why are you benefiting anything by removing every second board and laying down psal? Forget about that. The parts of the sukkah, they're going to be parts of the sukkah that don't have 3 walls. Why would that sukkah be kosher? Answers the Gemara. This is what we quoted a few times. Amar Afuna B'Reid Rabbi Yeshua. You don't understand the case. The case of this brayso is dafke besukkah doleihavia eloshmoina ames mitzum tzames askin. And guys, how many tvachim is an amma? No, 6. Right? The Beinani. 8 times 6 is 48. So let me go into tvachim. You have a sukkah that's exactly 48 amos. Again, I don't know why this person made the pictures. I'm going to use the same pictures, but everything is in the other direction. And what we're looking for is like this: is that what happened, guys? Halt the cup just to make the math over here. What happened is the brayso is saying on top of the amid that if bein neser leneser was kosher schach, you got yourself a kosher sukkah. You know what we're talking about? Says the Gemara. You have a wall and you put, it's not schach psula, but after the 4, my internet connection is unstable. I hope you guys can hear me well. I mean, we already learned this above. Neser,
another picture.
You have neser upsal. Neser upsal, neser upsal from one side. and do the math. And now begin from the other side. Again, the one closest to the wall was a nesed. A nesed is invalid according to our shita that just 4 tfachim is not good schach, and it separates it from the wall. Nesed upsol, and nesed upsol ma'aigis. But guys, don't forget doifen akuma. Everyone agrees to doifen akuma. So what we accomplish by explaining the Braisa is twofold. Aleph, yes, even if we're going to hold that schach passes even only with 4 tfachim because it's separating you from the wall. But hold on, as long as there is something on the roof, it can be completely puzzled. We tolerate up to 4 amas because of doifen akuma. So over here in the picture, or if you have it in your mind, which is easy, all of the nesarim are within less than 4 amas from the walls. So kaidem kol you have doifen akuma. Number 2, which is fundamentally important, you need to have in one place together at least 7 tfachim of kasher eschach to have the minimum size. So in our picture, even though that this example is you have 8 tfachim, zum gesund, you have 7 tfachim. You have 4 and 4 touching each other. The havalu shnei psalim. Psalim is good schach. Don't confuse it with the word pasul. It's without the vav. Be'emsa. And therefore, ve'ika hechsher sukah be'emsa. Only in this case will it be okay. In other words, guys, we're good. No matter which version, we can learn that schach, pasul, poisels, and 4 tfachim. The reason why the Braisa says that even Rabbi Meir, even according to the Chumrah, that even less than 4 tfachim, certainly 4 tfachim, they say that a board is pasul schach fine. So you got yourself pasul schach kosher, pasul kosher, pasul kosher. Everything works over here. First of all, you have the majority of kosher schach. Second of all, you have b'chal, you have doifen akuma. You have doifen akuma. I don't even need the majority, because all of the boards are within 4 amas, are less than 4 amas from the wall. This is the wrong that this guy made the picture like this, because he put one side not even near a wall. I'm using it in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
you have walls from both sides. You have walls from both sides. And you have 7 by 7. You have actually 8 by a lot. So that's the pshat that it's kosher. Now here, we have another 2 minutes. Rashi, there's a great diuk that many achronim make from the Rashi over here. Now let me ask you a question, guys. Where is it that you can use the sukkah? When people learn this, they're going to say, well, you can use the sukkah only if you're sitting under the 8 amas of kosher schach in the middle. This is a much better picture, because here you can see that you have a doifen on both sides. Well, you can push it. Good. You have a picture. So you have the 8. So you're going to say, you can only use the sukkah under the 8 tfachim in the center. So people are medayik. Rashi, 13 lines from the top, says that this tachas hanesarim lo yishan. Don't sleep, which means don't sleep, don't eat under the boards. Many achronim say Rashi is being machadish something amazing. Not only could you use the center 8 tfachim, even on the sides closer to the walls, you know what part is not valid under the beam, under the board. Many times we said, when you use doifen akuma, you may not be under the doifen. But don't forget, there's another nuance in this Braisa. Like, why would the Braisa say, bein nesed lenesed? Why did we have to remove boards? All the Braisa should have said is that just make sure that in the middle, you have 8 tfachim or 7 tfachim of kosher schach. Make sure that all of the nesarim are within 4 amas. Why didn't the Braisa say that? To tell you another chiddush, that since you have here a kosher sukkah, which is the center, you can extend the kashrus to the sukkah to people that are under the kosher schach, closer to the walls. Take, they cannot be under the boards because it's a doifen. But as long as you are under any part of the kosher schach, you are in a kosher sukkah. That's the chiddush of the Braisa, and that's why they speak about bein nesed lenesed. That's quite amazing.
That sounds like a huge chiddush.
Yes, it is.
Because you're using it as a wall and as schach.
That's it. And that's why many people challenge that. But that farenfers, like I just mentioned, why would the Braisa, if that's the meaning of the Braisa, why are you telling me, why ben nesed lenesed? If you need to rely on doifen akuma, which you have to, according to the shita, that 4 tfachim is already invalid. It separates it from the wall. For doifen akuma, the whole thing can be a doifen.
So that, but you can use 2 by 4 square sukkah then.
So that you asked that again. So like this, Kevan.
1 second. The 2x4s, Kevan, in this case, is not being used as chach. It's a wall. It's a doifen.
I understand on the corners.
Okay, got it. 1 second. Is 2x4 is less than 4 tefachim, correct?
Yes.
Not only that, who says it's possible? Why would it be possible? Who told you it's possible?
I mean, it's made for construction.
So that's the question that the Achronim speak about. Because when we spoke about that you asked that in one shiur, we began the other shiur by saying that if a material is currently used for construction, no matter its standard shiur, many apply gezeras tikra to that.
Right.
Isn't also for it's used as a keli? Didn't we mention that
then
before?
we
It's processed. It's processed. That's what Sukah
Right.
said. It's processed.
Exactly.
Even though the Gemara refuted that, but the Gemara only refuted it based on Rabbi Yehuda Marav. That was the beauty. And that's what many poskim say, but if not for that, then that's another way of understanding that Mishnah, Gezeras Kalim. Yeah. All right, Chevra, to be continued.